Christianity and Politics, the Modern Virtue of Hate. How love was lost in the political takeover of American Christianity. Growing up in the American South, the church was my refuge, a place where love transcended hardship. But over time, I witnessed a shift. Sanctuaries turned into stages, sermons into political speeches, and compassion into condemnation. This is the story of how love was overshadowed by hate in the name of faith. I grew up in the American South, where the church wasn't just a building. It was a sanctuary for people like my mother and me. It was a place where the poor, the hurting, the overlooked could find a warm meal, a kind word, and maybe even a glimmer of hope. But over the years, I watched something heartbreaking happen. The church that once stood for love and support began to change. It became more political, more exclusive, and less like the refuge I remembered. Through my own experiences and what I've witnessed over time, I've seen how Christianity in America has shifted from serving the marginalized to often marginalizing them. I watched the rise of the prosperity gospel and the influence of conservative politics creep into the pews and pulpits. The Jesus who once walked among the poor, the sick, and the outcast was slowly replaced by a version who seemed to only bless the wealthy, the powerful, and the politically aligned. This reflection isn't just a critique, it's a call to return. A call back to the foundational Christian principle that first brought me comfort and strength: love. Childhood in the Bible Belt. When I was a girl growing up in the American South, in the heart of the Bible Belt, I went to church 2 to 3 times a week. Going to church for me was witnessing my mother cope with an abusive, unfaithful husband, living in working poverty as an immigrant who barely spoke English, had a 6th grade education, and was raising 4 children. The church as a lifeline. People don't realize this, but the church, at that time, was what I called a doorway. It was a doorway to food, free summer lunches, Sunday meals, potlucks, a doorway to clothing and sustenance, clothes closets and food pantries, a doorway to education, musical, theatrical, trade-related, a doorway to support and medical services, including dental drives and emotional support circles, a sanctuary of love. The church during this time was a safe, democratic place. At least that's how I remember it in the late 80s and early 90s. It was a haven where disenfranchised people of color, the mentally ill or disabled, the abused and neglected could go for love. For me, it was a gateway of love in a world where poverty in the American South abounds. Serving the forgotten. I remember going to a hardened, poverty-stricken part of Jacksonville called Springfield, which looks nothing like it does today, each month to serve food, clothes, and testimony. Springfield was where sex workers, drug addicts, and neglected Black children wandered the streets. After the Great Fire destroyed Springfield, it was largely abandoned and became home to the descendants of former slaves. The rise of religious spectacle. Then, as neoconservative Republicans took political power and control over Christian broadcasting, the image of the Christian began to evolve. Enter the gilded mansions and the temples of the Trinity Broadcasting Network. Paul and his wife Jan Crouch, she of the beehive pink wig and the tear-streaked mascara, begged viewers to pledge what little money they had in exchange for branded trinkets. As money poured in, so did the brazen religious authority that televangelists like Jesse Duplantis, Oral Roberts, and John Hagee used to rain down condemnation on every sinner who tuned in. The disappearance of compassion. The image of Jesus as a beacon for the homeless, the criminal, the former slave, the prostitute, the impoverished, and the immigrant began to fade. In its place arose a new image, one hostile to such people. The prosperity gospel, championed by figures like Reverend Ike, who once said the kingdom of heaven is within through a God consciousness, was drowned out. It was replaced by a version of God external to you, accessible only through rich, white, conservative business people who decided if you were worthy of divine love, after a generous donation, of course. From service to judgment, church was no longer about serving the disenfranchised, the hurt, and the needy. It became a part of the political machine that disenfranchised, exploited, and abused the very people it once claimed to help. Poverty, once seen as a social ill perpetuated by greedy capitalists and monopolists, became framed as a symptom of moral failing. The radicalization of faith. I saw my mother and her husband, devout Pentecostals, become increasingly conservative politically and spiritually. Their version of God began to reflect the one sold by conservative religious networks and Fox News pundits: vengeful, punishing, and exclusive. The democratic, inclusive church I once knew became a machine of violence against anyone labeled an enemy. Reclaiming the spirit of church. I still love church when it serves people with food, education, health, and support, an inclusive environment that supports all walks of life. That is one of my greatest joys. But I've come to understand that religion as it exists today is often used as a political weapon that does more harm than good. Church, to me, can be any group of people who share common values. It doesn't have to be endorsed by a religious order. My religion is love. It's what Jesus said God is, and I will not deviate from that. Returning to the roots of Christianity. As I move forward in life, I'm determined to experience and understand love in all its meanings and actions. I remember the Christians who helped me when I was a poor child. I thank them for showing me what it truly means to be a Christian. Giving, serving, loving, and helping are not optional. They are the whole point. We don't prove our holiness through words, but through action. A final reflection. The American Christian church, as I see it now, has become an institution of religious legalism. In this, it is no better than the radical religious fanatics it has long demonized in its self-righteous, church-sanctioned moral wars. Empowering affirmations. I embody love and compassion daily. My actions reflect true faith. I stand for justice and kindness. Every day I choose empathy over judgment. Love guides my path forward. Thoughts from Jesus' teachings. Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me. Matthew 25, verse 40. This captures the heart of the true church I grew up in, serving the poor, the hungry, and the forgotten as a direct act of love toward God. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. A reminder that God's kingdom isn't reserved for the wealthy or powerful, but for those who are humble, broken, and open-hearted. It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Mark chapter 2, verse 17. Jesus declared his purpose to serve those most in need, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, not to praise those who already thought themselves holy. Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Matthew chapter 19, verse 14. A call to protect and welcome the vulnerable, rather than gatekeeping God's love behind wealth, status, or doctrine. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. John chapter 15, verse 12. The cornerstone of everything, unconditional, selfless love, not judgment, not political power, just love. It's your turn now. Share your stories with me. How has your personal experience with the church influenced your understanding of faith and community? And I'd like to know what you think. Do you believe the modern church aligns with the foundational teachings of Christianity? Yes, it upholds core Christian values. No, it has deviated from its original teachings. I'm unsure, or it varies by denomination.